Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans and you're watching the John Cedars channel from the bunker, and in this video we absolutely must talk about coronavirus report number 2. Yes, a new video has been posted to the jw.org website giving advice to Jehovah's Witnesses on the coronavirus pandemic, and whereas the first report video was hosted by governing body member Stephen Lett, the second one is hosted by his associate David Splane. Now, what I've decided to do, this is an 11-minute video, and rather than do the normal style of rebuttal, I've decided to break this into 8 questions. So for each segment I'm going to show you, there is a question that I would like you to be asking while you're watching David Splane talk, or while you're watching the various segments that he is introducing. And because I'm aware that lots of people will be watching my videos audio only without watching the screen, I'm going to read out the question relevant to the segment before showing the segment, if that makes sense. So the first question I want you to consider while David Splane is talking is, how does David Splane's compassion for those affected by the pandemic contrast with his attitude toward disfellowshipped ones through the organization's shunning policy?
Hello, everyone. I bring you warm greetings from the governing body and the United States Bethel family. We want you to know that we love you all very much. We're concerned about you, and we pray for you each and every day. We know that more and more of you are being affected by the coronavirus pandemic. You can't go to work. You can't go to school. You can't go to the Kingdom Hall or preach from house to house. Some of you have lost your jobs, and you have no idea how you're going to be able to feed your family. Others have family members who live far away. There's no one else in the house. They're worried about them. And sadly, some are mourning the loss of loved ones who have been victims of the disease. We want you to know that our heart aches for you. We're so sorry for your loss.
So David Splane wants Jehovah's Witnesses who are watching this video to know that the hearts of the governing body ache for those who have been personally affected by the coronavirus to the extent where they are separated from family members due to observing social distancing, or even they have family members who have died due to the coronavirus. And my question again is, how can we compare this compassion with the attitude that the governing body takes through its disfellowshipping policy? Because that has the effect of separating families. It's the exact same effect that he's describing, where families are separated from each other and can't have contact. Only with the coronavirus pandemic, at least you can pick up the phone, or at least you can jump on a Skype or Zoom call, assuming they have technology at their disposal, and you can have a degree of contact. But that is not the case when a son or daughter is disfellowshipped and the parents are told to shun them. There is no contact whatsoever. And this sort of treatment, this ostracism, which runs entirely counter to people's humanity and puts people in an intolerable situation, can sometimes lead to people committing suicide. That's how grave that particular situation is. So why isn't David Splane showing similar compassion to people in that situation to the extent where the shunning policy can be lifted? I'm sorry, I understand why he's doing this. I think it's responsible for leaders of a religious organization to show concern for their followers, but in the context of abusive leaders and in the context of abusive policies, this sort of Our hearts ache for you rhetoric is very shallow indeed. So the next question I want you to have in mind for the next segment is as follows. At a time when witnesses are cut off from many aspects of regular worship, who truly benefits from elders contacting witnesses to render shepherding services, the individual or the organisation?
Now, these are very stressful times, but it's important to remember one thing. No friend of Jehovah is ever truly alone. Through his Holy Spirit, Jehovah can help us, he can sustain us, even if there's no one else in the house. Another way Jehovah is helping us is by means of caring shepherds. And this is in line with the promise that he himself made. We're going to read Jeremiah chapter 23 and verse 4. And you'll see how this prophecy is being fulfilled today. I'm just going to read a part of it. Here's the promise Jehovah made, that he was going to raise up shepherds who will really shepherd them. And then at the end it says, none of them will be missing. Well, can you see how that promise is being fulfilled today in the elders? Just think of all the work our elders are doing to make sure that we don't miss out on spiritual food, for example. They're arranging for us to tie into congregation meetings. They set up shepherding calls using video conferencing. They arrange for meetings for field service. And they make sure we have telephone territory and letter writing territory. Of course, these shepherds are also concerned about your physical well-being. So from time to time, they may also check in on us to make sure that we have basic food items, medications, and other necessary things. Now, if they do that, don't be shy. Let the elders know your needs. They may also provide practical suggestions on how you can protect your health.
I think that what we've just seen is all about control. In the context of a pandemic, where all religions, not just Jehovah's Witnesses, are losing their grip on followers so that normal religious gatherings cannot take place anymore, so that people are isolated at home, unable to be love-bombed, unable to get that tantalizing feeling of being in a community that you get when you go to your church or you go to your mosque or you go to your kingdom hall. The one thing religions are going to be absolutely mortified about at the moment is losing control and people not returning to their places of worship once this pandemic is over. I'm sorry, that's what they're going to be thinking about. I don't think any Jehovah's Witness watching this report is realistically going to click play thinking, please tell me I'm going to be receiving shepherding visits because I absolutely need shepherding visits right now. The reason David Splane is saying all this is not to reassure witnesses that they will be getting shepherding visits, but to tell them to expect shepherding visits. Because that's Watchtower's response, in part, to COVID-19, is to try to mitigate this effect of witnesses being alone with their thoughts, no longer being love-bombed, no longer being overwhelmed by the social aspects of the religion, and suddenly being in a position where they're asking the serious question, do I really believe this? Does this religion really make sense? And what David Splane is saying here is, before you get too much time to ask yourself those sorts of questions, the phone is going to ring. And it's going to be an elder on the other end of the line reminding you what religion you're a part of and reminding you of the need to stay loyal, even if you're no longer going to be physically in attendance at any kingdom hall or assembly. Make no mistake, whenever the governing body are talking about shepherding visits in the context of coronavirus, this is not about the welfare of you as a Jehovah's Witness. This is about them This is about their control, and this is about them continuing to have a presence in your life, even though circumstances are greatly limiting your ability to be involved in the religion. So our next question is as follows. Where claims are made of special help, benefits, or protection for Jehovah's Witnesses, what supporting evidence is offered, and how compelling is it?
Now, as you can imagine, when the pandemic broke out, the elders had a lot of questions. They'd never dealt with this before. And suddenly, they needed to do all kinds of things that they hadn't done before. Set up video conferencing accounts. Learn how to use new apps like Skype and Zoom. What's that? And become familiar with how to organize an entire congregation meeting online. It's been a huge task for our brothers, and we want to commend them for the excellent job they're doing. The elders had a lot of questions, but through his organization, Jehovah provided the direction they needed. And an experience from Canada will bring this out. Let's watch a video in which Brother Warren Schufelt, a member of the Canada Branch Committee, explains what happened in Canada.
In the face of the coronavirus threat, a body of elders near the Canada branch recently met to determine how to go forward with congregation meetings. They had so many questions: how to balance the spiritual needs of the brothers with government regulations on gatherings. They prayed to Jehovah for guidance. But as their meeting went on, it still wasn't clear to them how to proceed. And then one of the brothers noticed on his electronic device a letter from the branch with instructions to the elders. As they read through it, it answered all their questions, and even some they hadn't anticipated. They viewed this as Jehovah's answer to their prayers. But now they had less than 24 hours to prepare their first ever congregation meeting by video conference. Prayerfully, they followed the instructions step by step, and the next evening, the whole congregation gathered for a meeting by video conference. The attendance was well over 100%. And one of the families that was in attendance wrote to the elders, "We are so grateful for all the effort to provide this much-needed spiritual food live. It was exactly what we needed. Thank you."
What an encouraging experience that was. Thanks, Warren. We really appreciate it. And you know, it reminds me of what the prophet Isaiah foretold at Isaiah 65 and 24. Even before they call, I will answer. While they are yet speaking, I will hear.
It really depresses me to think that once upon a time I could have been sufficiently indoctrinated to find that a compelling argument. So we're claiming that our organization is enjoying special protection and special help from Jehovah during this pandemic. Exhibit A. Some elders were having a meeting to discuss how they could continue holding Kingdom Hall meetings or holding congregation meetings during the pandemic. And this elders meeting happened to coincide with the branch sending out electronically instructions on how they should carry out their meetings. I kid you not. That's our evidence. As though it's impossible, by the way, for them to receive an email during a meeting. How? I just don't understand how that's worthy in any way, shape or form of being put forward as proof that Jehovah is responding to the requests or prayers of Jehovah's Witnesses during this time. He even invokes a scripture from Isaiah saying, "Before you even ask, I'm going to answer you." Well, what about all of the requests for help and all of the prayers, including by some Jehovah's Witnesses whose relatives or friends are dying from this disease, and those prayers or requests go completely unanswered, or the person dies, what about all of those far more important, far more urgent requests for help that God is apparently ignoring? Oh no, we need to be impressed because an elders meeting happened to coincide with the Canada branch sending out an email. Absolutely appalling logic. It's kind of an insult to everyone's intellect who watches this, but I'll obviously let you decide for yourselves as to whether compelling evidence has been offered. But let's jump to the next question. Where rescue efforts are mentioned, why does it fall to elders rather than the secular authorities to provide emergency services? And how does caring for members of one's own faith differ from how other religions respond to disasters?
When we think of caring elders, our circuit overseers come to mind because they're often a vital link between the branch and the congregation when a disaster strikes. And it reminds me of an experience my wife and I had back in 2010. I was assigned to do a shepherding visit to Haiti about 10 days after a tremendous earthquake took hundreds of thousands of lives. And sadly, 154 of our brothers also lost their lives. Well, I met with the traveling overseers in the country, and I learned that some of them had lost members of their own family. But they were at the forefront of the rescue effort, so they hadn't had time to mourn their own loss. They were still looking for survivors of the quake. So what did Jehovah say? I will raise up shepherds who will really shepherd them. None of them will be missing. And those shepherds in Haiti were going to make sure that none of their brothers and sisters were missing.
So we had a good example earlier of David Splane on behalf of the governing body trying to exert the organization's control by basically telling all Jehovah's Witnesses to expect shepherding visits, because again, the organization is terrified of people being left to their own devices, left to their own thoughts, and frankly, drifting away from the organization. This time, it's all about relevance. We want to be relevant. We want to be the organization that when there's a disaster, we're the ones who leap to the rescue. We're the ones who are sifting through the rubble. We're the ones who are rendering emergency services. My question is, why? Why is it that circuit overseers or elders or any kind of branch of the Jehovah's Witness hierarchy has responsibility to deliver emergency services rather than the authorities? I mean, sure, if an elder wants to do that or a circuit overseer wants to do that, I suppose it's a good thing. And let's be honest, in any sort of community, it's nice when people can look out for each other. It's nice when people within that community can check to see whether people in their own community are okay. I just don't see how that establishes anything beyond the fact that people in a club will look after people in their club. It doesn't tell us anything about whether this is Jehovah's organization or not. It purely tells us that witnesses will look out for each other. And again, I'm completely baffled as to how it is the role of elders or the role of circuit overseers to assume the role of the emergency services when there's some kind of natural disaster or earthquake. I can only explain this by, again, the overwhelming need for the governing body to stay relevant. They are essentially telling Jehovah's Witnesses, we're in control of this situation. We're all on top of this. This relates directly to us, and this relates directly to you as a Jehovah's Witness. All of this is interconnected, and don't worry, we're right on top of this. When the truth of it is, this is a global pandemic affecting everyone, And the heroes in this situation are not religious leaders. They are the emergency services, the first responders, the doctors, the nurses, even the people who are keeping infrastructure going, stacking the shelves at supermarkets, despite being at increased risk of contracting the virus by doing those things. Those are the heroes. I'm sorry, you're not telling me that religious leaders whose job it is to maintain control and maintain influence on people are the heroes in this crisis. So let's go to our next question. What is making a more noticeable difference in the ability of the organization to continue functioning in the face of the coronavirus pandemic? Is it Jehovah's Spirit and blessing, or is it modern technology?
Do you know that our fine traveling overseers are continuing to serve congregations as best they can during this pandemic? Now, how's that possible? In this encouraging video report, Brother Paul Achon, who's a member of the Philippines Branch Committee, tells how even remote congregations are being cared for. This is interesting. Let's watch.
A circuit overseer in the Philippines wrote regarding his experience using the video conferencing app Zoom to visit two of the remotest congregations in his circuit. Normal travel to these islands by small boat may take between 5 to 8 hours, depending on sea conditions and the size of waves from the Pacific Ocean. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, travel restrictions to Patnanungan and Humalig Islands were implemented. The circuit overseer and his wife prayed fervently to Jehovah, asking for possible means to still visit the congregations for the last 2 weeks of March. Just days later, they received a letter from the branch office about alternative ways of making congregation visits. This included the possibility of virtual visits with the use of online conferencing tools. The circuit overseer immediately informed the elders, and they excitedly tested their newfound means of communication. The visits were a success. The brothers and sisters were so thankful and really felt Jehovah's love for them. Reflecting on his experience, the circuit overseer said, "It is obvious that no coronavirus can prevent our Almighty God Jehovah from providing encouragement to his servants today. We are determined more than ever to help and encourage the brothers to continue trusting in Jehovah completely, as mentioned in Psalms 91:2, which says, 'You are my refuge and my stronghold.'"
What did we read at Jeremiah 23:4? None of them will be missing. Jehovah knows where all his sheep are, and he arranges for them to be cared for. Thanks, Paul. And please give our warm love and greetings to our brothers in the Philippines. We love them all very much.
So let me just break down the story that we've just heard. A circuit overseer in the Philippines needs to visit 2 islands, but due to the coronavirus pandemic, there are travel restrictions, so he's unable to travel to the islands, but he receives instruction from the branch office that he can instead carry out his visit using Zoom, and that's what he does. There is, unless I'm missing something here, viewers, there is nothing at all remarkable about that story. If anything, what it shows is that modern technology from Satan's system is coming to the rescue for Jehovah's organization, so that even though the governing body are against higher education and are even against science where it disagrees with their views, they have no problem at all exploiting modern technology when it suits them and when a crisis necessitates their use of this technology. That's what I've learned. I haven't learned anything at all about any kind of evidence for this being Jehovah's organization or Jehovah's blessing being on the organization, but it's being spun in such a way that if you're a Jehovah's Witness watching this, you're like, wow. First of all, look at how international the organization is. Second of all, look at how Jehovah is giving wisdom to the brothers so that they can overcome these challenges. I ask you, is there anything at all extraordinary about the story that we've just seen? But anyway, next question. What examples are given of the organization being one or even two steps ahead of the authorities in its response to the pandemic? And can the same be said regarding the organization's handling of child protection?
So, what do we want to take away from this brief discussion? 2 points. First, we believe that Jehovah will continue to guide his organization every step of the way. And it's been faith-strengthening to see how at times the organization has been one or even two steps ahead of the authorities in giving direction to protect the flock. So that's the first point. Jehovah will continue to direct the organization. Second, what is one of the means by which he will do that? By providing loving shepherds to carry out that direction. And over them is the one who said, I am the fine shepherd. The fine shepherd surrenders his life in behalf of the sheep.
Well, I've already explained why David Splane and the rest of the governing body are so anxious about shepherding during a time such as this. But let's look at that extraordinary claim that David Splane makes there, that the organization has been one or even two steps ahead of the authorities in their response to the pandemic. No examples given, so we're in no position to verify whether that's an accurate claim or not. We can't independently look into that and say, oh, well, he actually has a point there. And by the way, it's not inconceivable to me, because the world's a big place and there are lots of different countries and lots of governments can deal with the coronavirus pandemic in lots of different ways. So it's not surprising to me that there might be examples of where local governments, including in the United States, might be slow to introduce the provisions or the guidelines that are needed in the case of the coronavirus pandemic. But the organization is in no position whatsoever to be bragging about being one or two steps ahead of pretty much anything when they are flouting the recommendations of Caesar when it comes to child protection. And those of you who follow my channel closely will know that I'm under quite a lot of pressure by YouTube at the moment with demonetization. So let me call it CSA whenever I'm referring to child protection. It's an open secret that Jehovah's Witnesses as an organization put the organization's needs first and the needs of children second, so that even in the case of Australia, where you had a Royal Commission looking into this issue, and the Royal Commission made certain recommendations saying, well, here's the problem as far as we can see it, and here's what you need to do to fix it. And by the way, you guys really need to sign up to a redress scheme so that victims within your organization have some channel through which they can get some kind of financial relief after what they've been through. Guess what? Jehovah's Witnesses haven't signed up to the scheme yet. So they can brag all they want to about being one or two steps ahead with this pandemic, but it's intensely hypocritical when you look at the CSA issue for a governing body member to be making that sort of claim. And quite frankly, say what you will about any of the governments and their response to COVID-19, I'm not aware of any of them using the coronavirus pandemic as an opportunity to scare people into thinking it's the end of the world.
So the events unfolding around us are making clearer than ever that we're living in the final part of the last days undoubtedly the final part of the last days, shortly before the last day of the last days.
Or using it as an opportunity to remind people to stay subservient to them.
For example, this virus that is spreading around is giving us an opportunity to see about being obedient. We have many rules or guidelines that are being set for us. We may be quarantined. We may have trips and other things canceled. But we also have an opportunity to not be just obedient to rules and guidelines, but be obedient to the principles behind them.
And I'm not aware of any government that would deny their citizens treatments for coronavirus for arbitrary reasons, even if that meant people dying. And I'm referring here to an article that's just been published on JW Survey by Mark O'Donnell. You guys should definitely check it out. It turns out that plasma from people who have survived COVID-19 is being researched as a possible treatment for the disease, but because plasma is considered by Jehovah's Witnesses to be one of the 4 basic components of blood. So the 4 basic components, when you spin blood in a centrifuge, it separates into red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and plasma. We're just talking about how blood responds under centrifugal forces. This is not necessarily how doctors and scientists would view blood, but the organization has made this stance that plasma is one of the main components, and there's already been a circuit overseer's letter sent out in one circuit preemptively saying that it would be wrong for Jehovah's Witnesses to accept this plasma treatment, even if life was hanging in the balance. So you can say that the coronavirus pandemic, in the context of Jehovah's Witnesses, has actually served to give Jehovah's Witnesses one more way in which they can die, if this treatment with plasma does prove to be a lifesaver. So again, how David Splane can jump up and down about how amazing the organization is in its response to COVID-19, and make no mistake, as I've said in previous videos, I can imagine their response being far, far worse than it has been. But they are in no position to gloat. If anything, they have exploited this crisis as a means of extending their control and influence. So our penultimate question is as follows. Where advice is given specific to coping with the pandemic, how does this differ notably from what non-believers could discern by applying common sense or by consulting guidance from their government or the World Health Organization?
Brothers and sisters, take good care of yourselves. Don't take chances. Obey the instructions of the superior authorities. We at Bethel are extremely conscientious about following the guidelines we receive. So if the authorities tell you to stay home, stay home. Practice social distancing. Now keep up to date with the news, but don't obsess. Don't watch it too much. It can be just too discouraging.
For me, this is again another desperate attempt to stay relevant. There's no information here that you couldn't figure out by yourself or by doing the minimal amount of research. But David Splane and the rest of the governing body are terrified of being sidelined by all this. They're terrified of being irrelevant because people are no longer in the kingdom halls, people are no longer at the conventions, people are no longer at the assemblies. And it's in exactly this sort of situation where people could conceivably think, is this really true? Is this really an organization I should continue to devote my life to? Surely there are more important things. Surely there are bigger things in life than this. Surely it's worthwhile taking this time of social isolation and using it as an opportunity to objectively explore my beliefs. And the governing body are seeing all of this, and they are terrified. So their response is, make it look like we're important, make it look like we're on top of this situation, make it look like we're providing the answer and we're riding to the rescue, and more than anything, get those shepherding visits organised, because we need elders calling up witnesses in their homes during social isolation and reminding them what religion they're a member of. So our final question is as follows. In the context of a video specifically aimed at giving a report on the coronavirus pandemic, what is said to be the main focus for Jehovah's Witnesses? Is it staying safe and taking precautions, or observing their faith?
Now, what season are we in? Memorial season. So what should be the real focus of our thoughts at this time? The incredible gift of the ransom, the love of Jehovah God, the love of Christ Jesus. Those things should be the object of our thoughts. And when you feel alone or stressed out, repeat to yourself the heart-cheering words that we find at Hebrews 13:5. I will never leave you, and I will never abandon you. I will never leave you, and I will never abandon you. Be assured of our warm love and prayers. From the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses, this is JW Broadcasting.
I just find it extraordinary. This is all about them, isn't it? This is all about reminding witnesses of who they are, of making sure none of them forget to be loyal worshippers, of reminding them that this is the memorial season, and giving them some sort of mantra that they're supposed to repeat. Isn't that interesting? Using repetition as a means of control.
I will never leave you, and I will never abandon you. I will never leave you, and I will never abandon you.
Please repeat these words to yourself, and that will act as some kind of mystical safeguard for you against the coronavirus. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, viewers, but that's how it comes across to me. I mean, the coronavirus is not going to stop at the door of a Jehovah's Witness and go elsewhere. This is a virus that is affecting everyone, no matter how they pray, no matter what mantras they utter, no matter how spiritually strong they are, no matter whether they're a good person or a bad person. This is a virus that is killing everyone, including, we've already learned, Jehovah's Witnesses. So of what good is uttering a mantra, I have to ask, unless it's to remind witnesses of who they are, of their identity as followers of people like David Splane and his colleagues. So just a few questions really that I want Jehovah's Witnesses stumbling on this video to ask. Again, we're in a situation where most of us have more time on our hands, and I would really like Jehovah's Witnesses to be using this time for introspection and for asking these difficult questions, because as I've pointed out in previous videos, asking these questions is a win-win scenario. If you're going to do objective research into your beliefs, including by seeing what critics have to say and what you believe is really the truth, then it should stand up to even the closest scrutiny. It should stand up to any argument that people like me or others might make against the organization, because it's the truth. And by going through that process of investigating your beliefs objectively, if what you have is the truth, you will end up with a stronger faith. So it's a win there. If, on the other hand, what you have isn't really the truth, and probably deep down, you kind of already know that it isn't. But if it isn't the truth, and you go through this process of investigation and end up confirming that it isn't the truth, then you've saved yourself from spending the rest of your life devoting yourself to something that isn't true, devoting yourself to leaders who are so desperate for control that they would exploit a global crisis as a means of scaring people into following them. So just a few thoughts. I hope you found some or all of them interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to the John Cedars channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.